Welcome to the Top Order podcast. Raj, Lippy and myself, Binksy, in the room this evening. No Baldy, he's away on school camp. Tonight we are going to talk, though, Australia-India T20s, the IPL retention list. New Zealand versus Bangladesh and the start of New Zealand and Bangladesh's World Test Championship cycle. We've also got some other bits of cricketing news that we won't put in the preview in case we don't get to them throughout the course of the next 45 minutes or so. But that's all coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, boys, it's a bit weird to be not talking about a T20 World Cup for...
ODI
World Cup. I've forgotten my formats already. But... yeah, look, we're going to talk a little bit about the madness of what's going on from a cricketing treadmill perspective. It just never, ever stops. I think the hangovers of the Australian team have barely worn off. Mitch Marsh's sock mark is still very much on the top of that World Cup trophy. And then the Australian squad and the Indian squad, or 11s or whatever we want to call it, are playing a T20 series. So 2 games in, which we'll have a little chat about. But I guess first, just what are our thoughts 2 games into this series? Any major talking points that you want to cover off from an India-Australia perspective? Isn't it just madness that we're playing bilateral cricket this quickly after a World Cup?
It is, and I had the same thought, but then I went, but we're still talking about it and people still seem to be watching it and going into the games and things. So I guess that's the thing. Like, actually, there is a market for this. As much as we might sit here and go, okay, well, like, yes, these 2 teams, like, who cares? That, the games don't have any specific meaning. It does seem like people want them, and particularly T20s, there's TV audiences and there's people at these games going, okay, this is interesting. And so I don't know, as much as I'm not, nowhere near as interested as I was before, well, they're on.
It is interesting, as you say, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually quite into cricket, and I had no idea that this series had even started until I started preparing for this podcast. 2 2020s gone past. They look like they'd been very, very exciting. It's hard to find footage here in New Zealand of the games, but some real standout performances.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you mentioned hangover, because the first thing in my notes is that Travis Head is, I think, if would have a DNP hangover if it was a basketball reference. That the way that the pictures that emerged of him after the celebrating, and I'm kind of stunned that Australia have kept that many players in the squad. Really, I mean, if you look at Travis Head's situation, the reason he's not playing appears more to be the fact that they want to get Steve Smith into the opening spot and giving him an opportunity, which I do find quite interesting. Obviously, you mentioned the T20 World Cup before accidentally, but it's not that far away. It's actually, 6 or 7 months. We're sort of into that straight after the IPL. We're into the T20 World Cup. And if Australia is seriously thinking, okay, what are we going to do for our openers? Then Steve Smith, and obviously he hasn't set the world on fire so far in these 2 games. I think the third one is overnight, so people listening to this might see might already know the third result. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably the most interesting part from an Australian point of view, I think, in terms of how he can develop through the series and actually kind of stake a claim. Obviously, he'll have the BBL when he gets back to Australia. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's more about the Indians and some of the players that they've got coming through.
How close do you think either of these squads or 11s are to what might take the field in 6 or 7 months' time? It feels to me a little bit like we've talked a lot about India's strength in depth. We've seen Jaiswal, we've seen Gaikwad, we've seen Kishan, we've obviously seen Sky and Rinku and a number of others play some T20 cricket, and they're probably pretty close to that squad, you would have thought. But are there going to be all those big names coming back in, do we think, for the T20 World Cup? And then from an Australian perspective, are they actually really using this as build-up and kind of trying to get their combinations and their lineup by using these 5 T20 games? What do we think? Or is it a bit of an exhibition tournament by contractual obligation?
Yeah, I don't know if we use the E word, but yeah, it feels very much like an exhibition. I think that Australia are definitely using it to trial some things.
Yeah.
Tim David back into the side, I think he'll be a big part of their 2020 plans towards the tournament. Steve Smith batting at 1 or 2, I really like. We've seen that the 60 ball 100 is sort of where it's at from a 2020 perspective, from a when we talk about the IPL. So I like to see those batsmen, the Virat Kohlis, the Steve Smiths, actually having the opportunity to face half the balls, to face 60 balls, to get that 100. So, yes, there's definite experimenting going on, especially all through the lineup. The bowlers, I think, are going to be completely different when it comes to the actual all sides. Maxwell came back in for the second one. I think it's a very experimental lineup, but it is stuff that they may execute going towards the
India stuff. I think is quite interesting, and probably these. I mean, look, the IPL and performances throughout that IPL will have a big bearing, you would think, on who makes those final squads. But I do think for someone like Jaiswal, someone like Rinku Singh, who personally, both of them, I just love watching both of them play. I think that Jaiswal in particular, he's been able to take every single opportunity that's come his way so far. He played, got a test opportunity, scored 100. He's been, performed really, really well in the IPL. Absolutely looks the part, I think is the key part for me, that whenever he plays, he looks like an international cricketer now. So, I think him getting the chance at the top of the order is really important. And for Rinku Singh, he just seems to find a way to be an impactful player. And I guess in T20 cricket, you get so few deliveries sometimes when you play at that in that sort of finisher role. And we've talked quite a lot in different, even in ODI cricket, about how important it is to have a finisher and all those things. But to be able to come in, and he seems to find a way to be in situations where it's important that he gets 30 off 12 balls or, all that kind of stuff. And he just keeps delivering. So if he's going to keep doing that, I don't know whose spot he necessarily takes. I guess it's, he's probably competing with someone like Sky, which makes it pretty tough. But I wouldn't be surprised if both of those two find their way into that Indian T20 World Cup squad.
Sky's the standout for me. You think he's out of form by the way he's spent the last sort of 6 weeks with the one day side, but 80 off 40. I feel like I'm in Baldy's seat and he says, Marnus just needs to think he's coming in for a concussion substitute. Sky just needs to pretend he's playing 2020 cricket, and he seems to be middling it.
And it's got the C next to his name as well. Do we read anything into that?
Not at all.
Nah, I think it's just the fact that he's an experienced player in the squad that's, well, you guys didn't say it, but it's India B, really, isn't it? Just about.
Yeah, this is the tough thing, because I think that they're in a position where they could, like, so if we go back,
strong.
If we go back to the 1990s and this was the Carlton United Breweries series,
Great series.
Where Australia A could put out a side that was pretty decent, and almost the whole country was rooting for them to get into the finals against against the Australian side. This has got, I guess, a little bit of that in it, in that they can actually put together two 11s that are so close that you could make a pretty dispassionate argument for either of those sides to be there on. They're on merit. No, there's some superstars that obviously would come back in, but man, it's crazy to just think how much talent they've got.
The one other thing was Josh Inglis's 110 off 50. It's a big 100 for him. With Matthew Wade coming back into the side, that gives Australia the option to have another keeper. But we saw what Inglis can do, and we've seen it previously. We haven't seen it much over the last sort of one day stuff, but. He gave them a timely reminder. Yeah,
Matthew Wade might be dusting off his little medium paces, mightn't he? Because English didn't keep wicket in that game either. So, Wade, captain and keeper. We talk about India's strength in depth, probably a good segue into the IPL retentions. So I think... we've obviously got some trades coming up. There's been, trades in the IPL for a period of time. I don't propose I'm going to do a Baldy-like explainer on this at this stage. But what have we made of some of that? I've certainly got a couple of things from an English perspective, but probably the big one is Hardik Pandya, isn't it? From the last couple of days leading into that auction in a little while.
It's a curious one, isn't it? Because we had him I feel like 2 days before there was all this sort of the whispers started. It was one of those where, you see something on Twitter or you see something, and then you start to see a couple of articles come out saying Hardik's Hardik's going to Mumbai, and then some social media posts pop up with, faces that are blurred out and all those kind of things. And then I think for some point, Gujarat retained him and then traded him. It seemed like there was a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. But I mean, in terms of impactful players in the IPL in the past couple of years, in terms of what he's been able to do going to Gujarat and then going back to Mumbai now, one, I find it surprising that he would, in a way, want to go back because of just what an impact he's had for Gujarat, taking them to a title, taking them to a final again. After that, he's been able to kind of show his own leadership that he might not have been able to show at Mumbai. But, perhaps now that's what the path is for him at Mumbai. So, I guess we'll see over the next couple of years.
It's a curious one to me. I do want to talk about Cam Green because I think that's going to be great for RCB. But that trade that they've sort of made there, bringing in Hardik for Cameron Green, I feel like a lot depends on injury for Hardik there. I'm surprised that they've taken a little bit of a punt there. They had the Pollard sort of era before that. Hardik was supposed to take over the mantle. Then he moved off to LSG. Gujarat.
Yeah.
Gujarat. And again, we're back here where he's actually injured at the moment. So it's a bit of a punt, I think, losing or giving away someone like Cam Green, who's shown that he's got the skills to dominate at IPL. It's a real gamble for me.
And they had to let go Archer. I mean, Archer's obviously, maybe they were like, please, can we let go Archer because of, this big salary and the fact that he just hasn't been able to stay fit. But obviously he's also someone that, when fit, he can be, we have seen it in the IPL in the past. We've seen it at international level, what a good player he can be. So, to give up, I guess they've essentially given up Jofra Archer and Cam Green to be able to bring back Hardik Pandya and fit him into the lineups and then now still have some money left for this auction, which is coming up on December 19th.
Yeah, so I mean they've got a little bit of money in the kitty. I think Gujarat obviously going into that auction with a pretty decent purse. I think 38 crore or something in that region. So we talked a lot about the way that they were good in that, their initial auction coming into the roster, the same as Lucknow. I think from that perspective, you probably outperformed expectations for an expansion side. You mentioned that Jofra Archer release. A lot of England players, I think, have got the shunt. What do you think that's down to? I've got a view, but any views from the neutral?
I don't know. I mean, I would say it's trying to free up money, right? And this in the same way that that a lot of New Zealanders have been released as well. There's definitely Jameson, someone like Jameson who was on a reasonable wicket has been released. Michael Bracewell, Finn Allen, Lockie Ferguson, Tim Southey, a few names that are done. And I guess what I have never managed to figure out is it feels to me like it's a bit unfair to the players in that they can be retained at this nice at a cheap price. Someone like Glenn Phillips, for example, or Devon Conway, who has outperformed expectations, enormously in terms of his actual price range, not in terms of expectations, I don't think, because he's one of the best players in the world. But then someone who's too expensive and not, even someone like Harshal Patel was signed, got a big contract. RCB's able to just go, oh, no. We paid that for 1 year, but we don't want to pay it again, and we'll release you. And then, they have to go back in the auction, and I guess they can say, well, we'll try and buy you at a cheaper price.
Yeah.
But then how are the players going to feel about that? So I don't know that quite works out that way. And I've never sort of figured out all of the politics and the player protection for some of those things.
Yeah, and look, it's an interesting one from an English perspective. My sort of conspiracy theory, we've seen Root obviously released, we've seen Stokes released, but they'd announced that they weren't going to play because they wanted Stokes to get his fitness, and I think Root wanted a little bit of a break. Harry Brook, who really only had one performance for Sunrisers, got 100 and then I don't think got much past double figures. I think averaged about 9 or something for the tournament, so had a poor first outing. But interestingly, he's going to be in India, putting himself in that shop window, I think, in January when we play those five test matches. But for me, it's the rhetoric that's come from Rob Key. They obviously announced the England Central contracts, multi-year deals in the middle of the World Cup. Now, My understanding was they'd actually decided them and they'd told the guys before they got on the plane. So David Willey, who didn't get a central contract, knew that he was not getting a central contract on the day he got on the plane to go to the World Cup, which sounds a bit strange in itself. But I just wonder whether that rhetoric that was coming from the ECB about we're going to protect our players has probably maybe hurt some of those English guys that have been thrown back. It is the kind of, the real white ball players, the likes of your Josh Butlers, who are marquee players, that they're not going to get released. They're going to get retained by their franchises as much as possible.
Yeah, the player market in the IPL is very fickle. It's all based on not necessarily performances or standout performances that happen in the 12 months preceding. Everyone's probably just saving some money up for Rachin Ravindra to sign him up. I don't. The World Cup performances probably didn't help the English players as well.
Not.
I'm not entirely sure. I do think it's a two-way thing, though. I think there have been a lot of English players, and the rhetoric, as you say, from England has been, we're not prioritising the IPL over our international results, whatever format that be in, and you're just seeing the effects of it, I think.
It's probably, you mentioned Rachin before. I think there are going to be the World Cup performance. I think will have, because you talked about the shop window for some of those England players. That's going to be after the auction. The auction actually is December 19. So the World Cup performances for some of those guys, and Rachin in particular. I mean, that's the buzz, right? That Rachin's just going to get this huge payday. And Daryl Mitchell is someone that people have talked about. I think of all those other young players that we kind of talked about last week on our sort of World Cup wrap, like the Madhushankar, Kutsia, Omarzai from Afghanistan. Yeah. Some of those guys, I hope there's a bit of bidding for their services and stuff, and that they now might get some opportunities. And it is life changing. Maybe they can be like a Kyle Jamieson. They might play one season and then get released, or a couple of seasons and get released. But that money, he's probably bought himself a house, and those things are massively. If Rachin gets a massive deal, it could be huge for him.
Yeah, I think at some point now, and look, I don't know how this is going to happen. The way that I can see it happening is we've got these franchises now that have got an interest in other competitions as well. So Mumbai Indians have obviously got a team in the Dubai League, the team in the South African competition. There's talk of investment into the 100 from IPL franchises as well. So I'm not quite sure how that really works, because whilst there's not crossover with the competitions, there's crossover with the seasons. But I think that at some point those teams have got to put long-term deals in front of players, more like football, because I think that otherwise we are going to get this fickleness, and a massive one-year deal followed by doing your ACL. Playing in a different tournament means you don't get that, you don't get that security. So I think you'll start to see, players be a little less keen, because it can literally sort of make or break their finances based on the fickleness of the tournament.
Well, I think, did we talk about it a while ago around the percentage that the players get from the IPL compared to some of the other, like the NBA or the NFL? I think it is still very low, from
a revenue share.
From a revenue share.
Yeah.
And so it will be interesting over the next couple of years, because the IPL, look, it's not till March, and look, we're sitting here, three guys here in New Zealand talking about the IPL, because it is such an important part of the cricket calendar now.
Well, and the infrastructure of the game, because the money does make the world go round to a certain extent.
Yeah, and so it feels like a lot of money for these guys, but they could still be sitting there going, actually, we're still not getting quite our fair share here. And at some point they must, there'll come a time where they go, if we all band together here, and we can get better terms and conditions for ourselves and all these contracts. So, who knows?
Cam Green, he excites me, moving to
why
RCB.
You said that to me before, that off air, that you think that could be the more impactful part of this trade than Hardik Pandya.
I think he just adds an element that RCB don't have. RCB haven't had for a while. Someone who can bowl, someone who can go into that finisher position or even open. We don't know what role that he's going to play. I think it's sort of been hinted,
Coley, hasn't it?
Yeah, hinted that he will bat probably lower down the order. But they've got Dinesh Karthik, who's been doing a great job in that position.
Just not in the commentary box.
As a cricketer, he's been doing a great job in that finisher position. So that really excites me. I think that, going to he was at Mumbai, a very big, glamorous sort of club. He's going to another glamorous sort of club. You could almost say there's bigger stars in that, currently in that sort of RCB setup. Takes a bit of the pressure off him. He can go there and he can do his thing. And I think he could be a massive, massive element of their campaign.
Yeah. Well, look, we will come on to that in a lot more detail. So I think we'll have an auction show a little bit closer to Christmas, where we'll kind of go through that. And definitely some retentions. I'm really looking forward to seeing Will Jacks, I think. Because I think he actually might get a Guernsey through that tournament. But anyway, we'll come on to that in our IPL auction show a little bit closer to Christmas. Let's take the equivalent of a cricketing Valium and slow things down a little bit. Let's move to some red ball cricket. So we're recording on a Tuesday night here in New Zealand. To prove that, I can tell you that the score in that first test in Bangladesh is Bangladesh 184 for 4 after 50.
Ooh, bang, bang.
Lost a couple of wickets since we started recording. That's good. That 2 in an over or something.
That beautiful thing on Cricinfo where you can only see one batter's name, so you've just taken a poll.
Two red W's in a very quick succession.
Glenn Phillips picking up a couple of polls.
Put his cape back on.
Let's not talk too much about the game, because by the time you're listening to this, you'll know a lot more about the way that first innings has unfolded. But what we really wanted to talk about was, the beginning of this World Cup cycle. Some definite interest, I think, in the squad that's been picked, and then even more so the 11 that's probably taken the field, particularly for the Black Caps. And again, a handful of guys that 2 weeks ago were playing in a one-day international World Cup
semi-final, yeah,
and now we're playing a test match with literally no warm-up,
no prep, on what looks like one of the flattest wickets around. Although, we've just seen. Well, certainly the second wicket, Glenn Phillips didn't even need to use the wicket to take his wicket, so that was good. Why don't we start with the team selection? Because I know, Raj, you were sort of had a few thoughts around that, and then maybe we go into the World Test Championship, because we won't talk too much in depth about this actual game. But selection, you weren't quite convinced about what we've done here?
I wanted to see three seamers, mainly because I think that if we played a Ravindra or a Phillips, they'd be able to bowl from one end. So definitely if it was a Ravindra, you could get through 15 overs from one end, and then you've got Ajaz or Sodhi to bowl at the other end for the lion's share of it. I wanted to see Wagner. I've got some real sort of. I'm a bit upset that he didn't make the squad to start off with. He's been brought into the squad because Henry withdrew with the hamstring injury that he picked up during the World Cup. We've definitely probably moved on, I think, a little bit from Wagner's sort of, we're going to call it an era. I wanted to see Ravindra play. It was funny because he was in the media all the way up through the start of this Test series, and then he didn't actually get picked, which I thought was quite interesting. We were talking off air. We think it's because if he was picked, all the spinners would turn the ball one way with Ajaz and Sodhi as well.
It is a bit disappointing not to see Rachin play after all the buzz and after how well he played in that World Cup. And I guess not necessarily the results, which were obviously fantastic, but I think more the composure that he showed during that World Cup in lots of different situations. And even with the ball, I know that there were times when he was very up and down with the ball in that World Cup. He would have spells where it felt like he was very consistent, and then he would have other spells where, he bowled that over to Harry Brook, where he's bowling half tracker, picks up a wicket, and it just didn't quite, wasn't able to hold up an end. And it would have been interesting to see what he could do at Test level, because I think when we come back here to New Zealand, we're not going to play. It's very unlikely that we play a spinner. We just haven't done that in our home summer at all, a specialist spinner. It's always been Mitchell Santner, Michael Bracewell, Rachin Ravindra. Look, whoever it is along those lines. You can look at AJ's record. I still don't think he's picked up a wicket here in New Zealand. Hasn't hardly played many games. He's, when he plays, he sometimes doesn't even bowl. So I think that, we're probably looking, if Michael Bracewell still isn't fit by the time those tests are playing, then we're looking at Rachin Ravindra or Glenn Phillips probably filling that all-rounder role again. And I think in terms of bowlers, as much as it sounds like Glenn Phillips has picked up a few today, I do think Rachin is the better long-term bowler than what Glenn Phillips can be. So, yeah, I think I wanted to see him for that reason and what his role in our test side might look like and whether he could establish a consistent role and make it almost impossible for Michael Bracewell to get back in.
Definitely on the subcontinent, we've seen him put in performances with the ball that are good enough as a bowler, but he's predominantly picked as a batsman first. Just moving away from selection, I've got a question for one of you two. Feel free to jump in and answer it. It's the start of the third Test championship cycle for New Zealand. It's our first Test in 8 months. We've come through a golden period of Test cricket for New Zealand. The last World Test championship cycle was not great for us. Mm-hmm. Is this a team that's got something to prove?
Well, yeah. What do you think as a neutral, Binksy?
Yeah, look, I think it. I don't. To answer your question succinctly, no, I don't think you do have anything to prove. I think the fact that we keep talking about New Zealand as almost like a scrappy underdog, and you keep making World Cup semi-finals relatively comfortably. I think there's a little bit of strength in that, in depth. You say, you think it might be the end of the Wagner era. He's certainly closer to the end than he is the start. But my question is really, are they wrapping him in cotton wool a little bit for the home summer? Bangladesh hasn't been a great place to go as a seamer historically. I think you'll see
Bangladesh just picked one seamer in the squad. So
I think you'll see you'll see players rested. I think Jameson's not played a lot of cricket, so I think it's probably a good idea to get him back in the side. Obviously, there's no Trent Bolt from that perspective. So look, I don't necessarily think there's anything to prove. I think it's actually the start of a cycle. And it's the start of a transition, I think, in terms of eras. I'm interested to see your thoughts on whether or not there might have been even do we pick Rachin instead of a Henry Nicholls and say, do you know what, we're going to back you to bat 4 or 5, later in your career. Let's give you 20 test matches because we know that over that period of time, I don't think anyone around this table, particularly Raj, is going to doubt that Rachin's going to make it over a long period of time. Was there an opportunity to really actually, shake things up from that perspective? And yes, that would have given you a little bit of we've got a lot of options here from a bowling perspective. But I hazard Rachin's going to be a better batter than he is a bowler throughout the course of his career, and really giving him that opportunity. But no, I don't think New Zealand have got a massive amount to prove, and I think the balance of the side they're going into this Test match with, when we compare it with what Bangladesh have put on the park, I think you've got the combinations to be at the races. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think without this World Test Championship now being in motion, I think this would very much be a sort of moving on cycle. Like this next cycle would be, I think, would be not necessarily in the batters, and even if you think about what Kane Williamson said after the World Cup, he was pretty much asked, like, this has been a golden generation for New Zealand cricket. Yeah. How much more do you see? Do you think this is the end of this golden generation, essentially? And he kind of said, he sort of made a joke. He said, you're sort of talking about how old we are. but then he kind of said, look, I still think this side has a lot to offer. And I think in those ways, they might feel they still have a bit to prove, probably Tim Southee and Kane Williamson. I don't think Kane's got anything to prove, but I think those players probably think, if we are going to be this core and remain this core throughout the cycle, we do have to show that we can compete. Because if we're not competing, then I think the time is sort of right to start thinking, not necessarily in the batting, because I think there's plenty of depth and that most of those players are performing. Who knows what happens in this test. But I think most of them are performing. but probably on the bowling side, and particularly the fast bowling side, and even the spin bowlers. I think Ajaz and Ish both have quite a bit to prove on this series. If you look at our World Test Championship cycle as a whole, our away series are Bangladesh for 2 tests, Sri Lanka 2 tests, 3 tests in India. So spin, you would think, is going to play a hugely significant role in all 3 of those series. And then almost nothing in the home series where we play England, Australia, and South Africa. And in those games, if it is the end of the Neil Wagner era, if Tim Southee is coming towards the end, and Kyle Jamieson and Matt Henry, if that's our 4, we saw last year, we're on to the Blair Tickners and the Scott Kugelines and these other bowlers who people probably don't view as long-term answers. So it's about trying to figure out, I would love to, over this cycle, you would love to say, it'd be great if we could develop a couple more options in the seam bowling front. But how do you do that if you actually want to compete for these titles and think that, Tim Southee, Neil Wagner and Matt Henry are your best 3 options? So I think it is a bit of a balancing act in terms of what they're trying to do there.
Can I ask a question as well as to, from a cycle perspective? I think it's highly unlikely Tim Southee gets to the end of this 4-year cycle.
2025. So it ends up being a shorter cycle.
But who's the next captain?
I think it's fascinating. I don't know that I can answer that question at the moment.
Tom Latham,
Probably Latham, if you think that he's going to go a bit longer, and I guess if Kane doesn't want to go back and do it in a few years, I guess Latham's a slightly younger than Kane, but not by a huge amount. He's still in that range of how. They're all over 30, right? That's the thing. All of these guys pretty much are over 30, apart from Rachin and apart from, but I think Blundell now is 30. So I think it's, apart from him and Jameson, they're all over 30.
And just a question just around this series against Bangladesh. How important is winning this series based on the fixtures you've mentioned there? We're playing India in 3 tests, South Africa, Australia and England as our home summer. This Bangladesh series looks fairly important to us to win this.
Well, but it's really important for the simple reason that you should get the overs in as well, because both of you are bit 7 spinners, so no over 8 fines. So whatever points you take away from this series, you probably take away without getting any docked. So I think it's pretty key to get off to a good start.
I think this one and the South Africa one, where we expect it will be South Africa B essentially in terms of who's coming. As disappointing as that is, and South Africa having their clash with their T20 squad, I think we got to start well. Like if we want to compete and be in the mix for that cycle, these two games are critical in terms of us picking up points and then picking up points against South Africa, which, like I said, could be almost 2 completely different bowling attacks. And particularly if you look at this Bangladesh side, they are very much moving on, and their coach has said that we are moving on. Liton Das is not in this series. Neither's Tuscan for an injury. Shakib is also injured, but he's also got his parliamentary situation that he's trying to run for Parliament as well. So whether we see him down in New Zealand for the white ball stuff, who knows?
It might come down to negotiate a trade deal. Who knows?
Maybe. So, but Bangladesh has certainly signalled. They've got the Tamim Iqbal situation. So they've signalled it's time to move on. And I think if you look at their World Cup, it was all the young players that had a lot of promise. Not many of them were able to actually put that into practice. So I think they, in particular, a lot of those young players have a lot to prove for them over this cycle. So if we're ever going to put in a good performance in this cycle, I think it's very important to get a good start, because if we don't come away with points from this Bangladesh series, then it's going to be pretty tough with those fixtures. We always struggle against Australia. England, we expect in 18 months will still be on this Bazball roller coaster, and it's not even a roller coaster; it's just a mountain at the moment to get over that side. So some tough series ahead, and 3 tests in India is going to be very, very difficult for this New Zealand side.
Yes, agreed.
Right. Let's move on to some other cricketing news. So it's been a while since we've got this deep into the run sheet with the World Cup going on. But what do we want to talk about? We've got Babar Azam stepping down as Pakistan captain. We've got a bit of trouble for Zimbabwe in the qualifying tournament. getting beaten in, I think, Uganda's first game against a full nation, and they've
pretty cool, right?
dispatched them. Yeah,
that was cool, and I mean,
Uganda have had pretty good under 19 credentials, haven't they, in recent times? So yeah, not surprising that they're that they're able to compete on that stage. But yeah,
I have to say I was a bit surprised in Zimbabwe. I mean, I've seen a few commentators, and obviously David Houghton, the coach, came out and really laid into them in the media in terms of, that was actually for their first game against Namibia where they lost. Called it one of the worst performances he's ever seen, I think, and I'm sure losing to Uganda was they got laid into similarly.
Yeah,
but I think back to that ODI qualifier, World Cup qualifier, and I loved the cricket that Zimbabwe were playing. I thought that they felt like a side that was on the improve. I have no idea about the politics and everything that goes on behind the scenes and the depth and all of that kind of stuff. That's I just can't keep up with what's going on there. But with Sikandar Raza and some of the other players that were performing in that tournament, it felt like, okay, maybe Zimbabwe is sort of building to be on the fringes again of these quality sides and put themselves up with the likes of Ireland and Netherlands and Afghanistan to actually be testing these top sides. But yeah, they're in a bit of strife now, and I think they're going to have to beat Kenya in it. I think they're going to have to beat Kenya in this. This top two sides go to qualify. Yeah, you losing to Uganda, losing to Namibia again already. So if those sides can win out from here, Zimbabwe's done and won't be at the T20 World Cup. And I mean, look, if Uganda can make it, that would be amazing. And even for Kenya, if Kenya can come back, I have fond memories of watching Kenya play. Back in the early days of watching cricket with Steve Tickolo and
Brett Lee bullying Brett Lee.
Oh yeah, that was rough.
Yes.
But yeah, look, definitely something to watch over the next week to see how this African qualifiers go.
Yeah. Babar Azam stepping down as skipper, not surprising after the World Cup performance. Raj, you got some notes on this?
Look, it looks like a little bit of boardroom shenanigans to me, and we know that translates to poor performances on the field. So Baba was essentially told that he would lose the white ball captaincy at that was a fait accompli. He was going to retain the red ball, but then the caretaker board, which is currently in place, chairman didn't have the power to strip him of the leadership, and it turned into a little bit of a farce there. But at the end of the day, Baba Azam has stood down as captain.
Yeah.
Look, he's followed the same. If you have a look at all the great players in the world, he's followed the same trajectory. The Roots, the Williamsons, the Kohlis, and the Steve Smiths. They've all done it, and they've gone back to just being batsmen and scoring runs, and it's worked for them. He's scored a lot of runs as captain, and he will continue to score runs without that captaincy. So it's good for him. The coaches have been retained.
Yeah,
which is
kind of Grant Bradburn and Grant Bradburn in particular seems to have been not officially fired, but kind of demoted. I'm a bit gutted for him.
Apparently, they can't fire them again.
Yeah.
So look, they've been retained. They're going to Australia on November the 30th. First test December the 14th. That'll be one to watch.
Yeah, you sort of feel like they're going to be hiding for nothing going to that, and it's all the fanfare is going to be about Warner, isn't it, in that series? But still, I don't know. I when I see stuff like this, I just sigh. Basically, it's sort of like we always see there's so much potential in Pakistan cricket. There's so much quality in that side, but I don't know now. Like Shaheen Shah Afridi's been thrust this captaincy. I mean, maybe he wants it. Maybe it'll bring out the best in him, but
He's still very young.
He's still very young. He's just had a World Cup where, stats might say differently, but I think he was quite disappointing. And that World Cup really wasn't quite at his best. And he's got the potential to be one of the best bowlers in the world. And now suddenly he's kind of involved in all of the politics where you sort of don't want to be. And you've got Hafiz who, picks up the chairman or whatever that role was. And then like 2 days later now is like the coach as well. So it's just sort of... It's just a bit of a shambles, and I guess it always has been. I mean, when we talked to Wasim Khan, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever that was, he's
longer than that probably. I think he's been in the ICC role for coming up to 2 years.
He pretty much said the same thing. So I mean, we're not breaking news here with all of this stuff about Pakistan, but it's just.
It was never going to work with the team. I don't know what Mickey Arthur's role was, but he was the head honcho, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But he was doing it on a part-time basis because he's combining it with with a county coaching contract. You can't be a director of cricket via Zoom, I don't think. Well, maybe you can.
Work from anywhere.
Yeah, but I think they would definitely look at their flexible working policies as part of this review. This review.
And it's just, I feel like we're seeing it too often, right? Like the West Indies are doing it as well.
Yeah,
West Indies are shooting themselves in the foot with, I mean, the late we've talked about a lot of their stuff going on as well, but the latest is this Darren Bravo situation, and I think what we as New Zealand fans will be critical of certain parts of our structure and selection and all of that kind of stuff. But I think if you look around, we're actually pretty fortunate to have a stable structure,
transparent.
Pretty transparent structure for a long time. When you actually look at, Sri Lanka's just been withdrawn because of the
South Africa. It's all
there's just so many unstable sides, and it's so bizarre.
So Binksy, I've got 2 words for you: stop clock.
The shot clock.
Stop clock.
Is it called the stop
I think
clock?
it's the stop clock. I could be wrong. Everyone's going to crucify me there. But the stop clock is to be introduced, and it is a clock between overs. So it's going to count down 60 seconds. Bowler needs to be at the start of his mark after that 60 seconds to bowl. And if they breach that 3 times, I'm assuming it's the 4th time that they breach that, it will be 5 penalty runs. Added to their score, taken away from their score, however you want to look at that, or added to the batting team's score. That's going to start in this one-day series, the West Indies-England series, and it's going to go for 6 months on trial till April 2024. I know you're excited about it. Tell me.
I'd be more excited about it if it was actually in all formats. So I think it's only, as I understand it, in T20s and ODIs. So where we've got, I think we've got this problem across all parts of the game. I don't even want to go into it because it gets my blood pressure up so much. And I know a lot of people are just like, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the game. But I think it would for newer fans when you're in a ground and you've just seen the, Gatorade sponsored drinks break and 4 little bloody golf carts come on. And then literally 2 seconds later, someone's changing their helmet and their gloves and having another drink and having a towel down and calling for an aspirin and then a new bat. So it's great. I really hope that they go to the letter of the law with this and that they actually do. Like they did, I think we saw it in the Rugby World Cup. I think Owen Farrell kicked a penalty and literally they went, "No, sorry, mate, it was 61 seconds and you'd only got 60 seconds. Tough luck. There's no leniency on your bike." So I hope they actually keep it and stick to it. And there isn't this sort of mitigation that we currently have with all of this, where the umpires can go, "Oh, we did have a little bit of a problem with the sight screen, and one of the stewards fell over, and a helicopter came over." Or, so I hope that they actually do regulate the pace of the play by using this to the letter of the law. But I want to see it. I want to see it across all formats of the game because we've got to get. We've got to get overs in. I think it is for me. It's a plight on the game. But there you go.
The one positive I will say is that I have heard recently a lot of positive stuff coming out of the US in terms of what baseball has done, which is similar things about throwing back to the bases and all of that kind of stuff. A shot clock for the pitchers to try and speed that game up, and all of that. Those regulations seem to have been positive for the game, so and actually made it a better product. Who knows?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I follow quite a lot of baseball stuff, and I think there's been a mixed reaction.
Real pushback from the traditionalists.
Okay.
So look, we'll see. I think it's a great suggestion. I hope it works, and then I hope it makes its way into other parts of the game as well. Lippy, I've got 3 words that I know you've been longing to hear. It's actually 4 words. New Zealand domestic news. So what do you want to talk about? We're into round 17 of the Plunket Shield whilst this World Cup's been going on.
We're into the Ford Trophy now and the Halliburton Johnson Shield. So we're into the white ball stuff. Look, I sort of feel like when we're just snapshotting some of the stuff, there isn't a huge amount to talk about in terms of going in depth on all of the leaderboards and all that kind of stuff. I do think Raj and I have had a few conversations. We might just pinpoint a couple of players. I do think, just very briefly, great to see Adam Milne back on the park for Wellington. I still would love to know if he actually was injured for the World Cup or not. I suspect so. I just haven't actually seen that confirmed 100% anywhere. But, I would have loved to have him over that World Cup and have him as an option because, he's come back into the Ford Trophy, picked up a 5 for straight away, 5 for under 30, I think, from his first spell back. And I just think he really offers something different that a lot of our bowlers don't quite have. He can bowl up top, he can bowl at the death, and he can do a few different things. So his injury, I think, and his struggles with injury over the past couple of years have really limited a lot of that fast bowling depth that we've talked about, particularly in the white ball formats, which is a bit of a shame. The other one that Raj and I have been talking about a lot is Zach Folkes, and listeners who are not from New Zealand might not. It's not a name you might not might recognise, but yeah, he just feels like someone that has something special about him. And that Canterbury bowling attack in particular, they're really strong. There's a lot of young players. Will O'Rourke is someone else who was on a New Zealand A tour to Australia and did really well, and so is someone that is starting to become on people's radar. But yeah, when you look at that Canterbury bowling attack, with the fact that Michael Rippon has gone there from Otago, Michael Ray's gone there from Otago, now there's suddenly a core of talented players that have difficulty actually making a provincial side in New Zealand, which is has at times been quite surprising because of the sheer number of players that we have here in New Zealand. But yeah, Folkes just seems to have something special about him.
He's definitely caught my eye. He's a good bowler. He's averaging in the low 20s with the ball. And what caught my eye was him opening the batting at the start of the season with the red ball. His numbers aren't great with the bat, but
he's scored a couple of 50s recently.
He's come back. He's moved a little bit down the order. But look, if he's obviously on the radar, he's got to be on the radar for some higher honours. If he can continue to bowl the way he is, he seems to always be taking wickets. And if he can add runs to his, if he can bat in the middle lower order and take wickets, he's the kind of all rounder that would add balance to any side.
Yeah, well, and I think we don't necessarily see all the footage. We see we actually do now get quite a good coverage of the Plunket Shield, being able to watch it on YouTube and things like that. But yeah, when you're just scrolling through highlights, and the thing that stands out about Zach Folkes, it just seems to zip right when he's got a bit of zing about him. Yeah, look, we'll see what develops for him over the next couple of seasons. But thinking about bowlers that are looking into that future and who might be able to come through, the Will O'Rourkes, the Zach Folkes. We've seen Ben Sears get opportunities, and he's been back Plunket Shield and stuff for Wellington, which has been really good. Nathan Smith up the top of those charts. So I think there is some depth, and I'm sort of excited to see how the next couple of years can go for some of them. But yeah, I think there's a bit to prove still for a lot of those players.
Right. Any other business? Have we got anything else we want to cover?
The only other person I was going to mention from the New Zealand side of things, and sort of just to segue to the fact that New Zealand's White Ferns have got a series against Pakistan starting on the 3rd of December. So unsure if some of the more experienced players, so Sophie Devine in particular, unsure if she'll be back from the WBBL, where she's carving up again for the Scorchers, doing very well over there. Made their tournament team, I think, but the playoffs are just about to happen. But Georgia Plimmer, who scored 147 at the weekend, I think, for Wellington. So kind of just, stunning that she's played, I think, probably almost 20 games for New Zealand so far. Before this, hadn't scored a list A or a T20 50. Is someone that has been, talked about as having a huge amount of promise. We now see a big 100 from her. So, we've talked a lot about how the White Ferns have relied so heavily on Bates, Devine, even Maddie Green in recent times, relying on the old guard, I guess. We really need to develop some of these younger players, and hopefully Plimmer, after this big score can give her the confidence to kick on, and we'll see what happens against Pakistan.
Awesome. Well, we will cover that, I think, on next week's show. So, so much cricket going on around the world that almost the whole of that WBBL clash with the ODI World,
which wasn't ideal
World
for
Cup.
them, surely.
But yeah, certainly for next week, we'll cover those playoff games. We'll cover a wrap up for the Test match that's going on now, Bangladesh and the Black Caps. Preview the next game, and then I'm sure we'll find a way
Be 15
to
other
talk
things that have
about
happened.
India's strength in depth as well by the course of next week. But it is going to be a wrap up from us here in Auckland this evening. Please do engage with us on the social channels. It's been great to see that throughout the course of the World Cup. We'd love to see that through this New Zealand summer as well. If you can share the podcast with a friend, colleague or club mate, we would much appreciate it, as well as smashing like, subscribing or doing all those things on social media that apparently make a big impact to our viewership. So look, thanks for joining us on the Top Order podcast. We will see you next week for This Week in Cricket. But for now, it's good night and God bless from us here all in Auckland. We'll see you soon. Good night.